it's all one, you know. That's why I quoted this Sufi saying, in the name of that which has no name, but which appears by whatever name you call it. And there are so many different ways to make this journey, and yet it's the same journey, because we are the same divine spark seeking the divine. It is all one. There is no difference, and yet we are each unique. You are different to me, and everybody here is unique. They each have their own individual path to follow, but it is only one path, because there is only one soul going back to God. There is only one self realizing itself over and over again. There is no difference. This is the great human misconception, is this, the I, that I exist separate to somebody else. And yes, it gives us this unique experience, what we call our life. And in the West we have developed this I think, to an extreme. It's very different to the I in India or the I in indigenous culture, which is not so individuated. But then the next step is to take that I back to oneness, in a way to offer the I back to this mystery that we are all one, and we are all part of this incredibly beautiful, interconnected, living wholeness we call creation, or the world, or existence, or the absolute coming into form, however you like to call it. But there is no difference, really. Look, I mean, there is no one, and yet we are born with this experience that we are separate. This is the great human drama. We experience being separate, being individual. In Sufism, this is called the pain of separation. We experience being separate from God. And in fact, Rumi, the much-loved Sufi poet, the beginning of his great poem, the Mathnawi, is the cry of the reed torn from the reed bed. And he said, my lament has caused men and women to moan ever since the time of separation. We feel separate from the source. Look, we know we are one, but do we feel we are one every moment of every day? With every breath, do we feel we are the one coming into existence and going back into non-existence? No. We have what we call our life. This is the human drama, with our relationships, our work, our children, our struggles with ourselves, our struggles with our friends, our neighbors, our lovers. When you make love to your lover, do you experience it as oneness, experiencing oneness? No, you experience it, you as your lover, and then there is that moment of ecstasy, of bliss, when you are lost, when there is no longer you and your lover, there is just that moment of bliss, of oneness. And so, yes, everything is one. There is no difference. And yet we also have this very human experience that we are different. We long for this oneness. We long, or in Sufis say, we long for God, the beloved. And our life is often searching for something. We talk about a spiritual search. We search for something. Of course, when you find it, you know it was always you. The great Sufi story of the quest, Attar's conference of the birds. The birds set off on a quest. At the end of the quest, they discovered that the simurg, what they were seeking, is their own self. But you have to make the journey. This is the human drama. This is the longing for oneness. Each human being is different. For some, the drama intensifies until that final moment of liberation, when you bow down before God or merge into oneness, however you describe it. If it is softening for you, then you are blessed. Then you have found an easy way to reclaim your own wholeness. But look at, for Christ, the final image of his journey is being crucified on a cross. That is not a softening, and that was he knew that was going to happen to him. That was his destiny that he accepted, and many great saints or mystics have had that experience. course there is suffering. Of course there is suffering. My teacher, he said, the ego does not want to go with laughter and with caresses. It must be chased with sorrow and drowned in tears. Look, your ego, your I, your sense of who you are, it has been king, it has been queen, it has been the person in charge for all of your life. Is it suddenly going to step out of the way without making a drama, without complaining? No, it's going to put up a fight. Yes, at the end, when you have surrendered. It is so easy. You just surrender. You say, thy will be done, whatever the thy is. You know you are part of the oneness. You know you don't matter. You are a drop in the ocean. But until then, otherwise everybody will be enlightened. Everybody would live their true nature. That is a very advanced state, my dear. No, my teacher, he used to say, enlightenment is just taking the next step. You know, the child, for the child, it's just, the child, for the child, the crib is the whole world. And then he gets out of the crib and the consciousness expands, and that is enlightenment for the child. Suddenly he lives in a room. Then he goes to school and the consciousness expands again. Then one day he leaves school and goes to university and the consciousness expands again. So, and then maybe he gets married and has a family and the consciousness expands again. So there is no such thing as a moment of enlightenment that is complete. Yes, there are moments of enlightenment when our consciousness expands, but the journey continues. I have been in this business for 40 years. I am still just beginning, just taking another step. And then you realize one day there is nobody to become enlightened. The I cannot become enlightened. The I is left, an old suitcase, an old suit of clothes that used to be called yourself. It has gone. Something is left. What is it? That is the great mystery. What is the human being when there is no I? Look, we live in a culture in which the old container of society has gone. We no longer, in the West, we no longer really, unless you're very fortunate, have the container of the extended family as they do in the East, for example. We no longer have the container of the village community. We are left alone so often. And to make this journey, to discover your true self, you need support, you need a container. And I think to be part of a spiritual group, to be part of a Sangha, is of immense value. It gives you that container. Rumi says somewhere, it's much more difficult to go to the tax collector on your own. If you go with some friends, it's easier. There is support. There is a shared commitment to the journey. We live in a culture that doesn't value spirituality at all, that values materialism. We go against the collective, we go against the stream. And so to have a Sangha, to have a spiritual community, a group, even just a dream group, I shouldn't say just a dream group, even a dream group that can support us, infinitely precious, infinitely valuable, yes. Sufi is called the child of the moment. We live in the moment. We belong to the moment. We respond to the moment. We respond to the need of the moment. That's why we are not limited by form or structure. In fact, it is said Sufis never create a form that is intended to endure. Because, I give you an example. We are in the West. We are in America. Americans are very informal. So my students call me LLewellyn. This would be unthinkable in India, where my teacher came from. You weren't even allowed to address him directly. You had to wait till he spoke to you. You would never have called him his first name. You would have said, Guruji. It was in India, it's a term of respect. In the West, there is no respect. Everything is personalized. So my students call me by my first name. So that is an example of how something has changed to become accessible to the moment now, the time and the place and the people. The Sufi says those three have to come together: the time, the place and the people. And so you respond to the need of the time and the place and the people. And yet, of course, you have to stay true to certain esoteric principles, certain qualities within the heart, without which there can be no journey. For example, in our tradition, transmission is very important. You can call it grace or transmission. It's interesting, actually, I found Adyashanti also said, for him, transmission is very important. This comes down in our tradition through the connection with the teacher. A certain transmission is given. Certain energy is given from heart to heart. Without that energy, the heart can't get awakened, can't begin to turn, can't awaken you to your higher nature, because in our Sufi path, that is how the individual is given access to their higher spiritual nature, is the heart chakra is awakened. It's very simple. Love, a certain frequency of divine love is put into the heart. And when that goes into the heart chakra, that center of spiritual consciousness in the heart, starts to spin at a higher frequency. And when that starts to spin, it begins to give you access to your higher spiritual consciousness. Because as you know, we have, as much as we have a physical body, we have a spiritual body, and it has many different levels of consciousness. I think it's 7 or 13, I'm not quite sure. But you begin to have access to higher states of consciousness through love. That's how it's done in the Sufi tradition. We work with love. I tell you a funny story about that, which was the romantic love is actually quite a recent phenomenon. It didn't exist much, for example, in the 10th century in Europe. If you read 10th century literature, there isn't much reference. There are heroes, there are warriors, but there isn't very much romantic love. And what happened was the troubadour poets followed the Crusaders. And when the Crusaders went to the Middle East, the troubadour poets went with them. And there was this intermingling of cultures because of Islam and Christianity took place in the Middle East. And there the troubadour poets met the Sufi poets. And the Sufi poets spoke about love. But they have a whole symbolism of the love for the woman as a symbol of divine love. There's a whole esoteric symbolism that the tresses, the beautiful curly hair of the woman, has a particular symbolism of divine presence. And the mole on her cheek means another aspect of divine immanence. And the troubadours, of course, were touched by this love poetry, inspired divine love poetry. And so they created this whole poetry of love. It became what's known as courtly love, the courtly love tradition, out of which grew romantic love. But they didn't realize that the woman imaged in the Sufi poetry was the beloved, the great beloved. They thought it was just a woman. And so we have this tradition of romantic love that has been split, taken away from the source of divine love. But if you follow the thread back, the woman is beautiful. Rumi says somewhere, a woman is God shining through subtle veils. And so the woman is loved because the great beloved can be seen in the beauty of a woman. But we've lost the mystery, of course. That is part of the sadness of our culture. Just as we've cut ourselves off from our own soul, we've lost the mystery. And one has to try and rediscover that mystery. It's the mystery of our own soul, what it really means to be a human being. We live by mystery, not by explanation. You know, you take the mystery away, then there is no magic, there is no depth. Who am I? I am just a piece of dust. A piece of dust in the courtyard of my sheikh, of my teacher. I carry the perfume that comes from the garden of my sheikh. Just a piece of dust, an ordinary piece of dust. Yeah?